Here at Shaun of the South, we're keeping our hands sharp with the help of Case Knives, the sponsor of this episode. A tradition of my family for generations, my granddaddy used to say the best cure for idle hands was to build something. But in today's day and age, everything's done with a click, a swipe, or a tap. But how about we put away the screens and put your hands to work with a case knife?
Well, keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Keep on that sunny side of life. It will help us every day. It will brighten all the way if you keep on that sunny side of life. Hey, you're listening to Shaun of the South, and I'm your host this evening, Sean Dietrich, coming to you live via the podcast airwaves and the radio waves all over this nation. This guy, see behind me here playing the biscuit box guitar is Chet Johnson and Truman Holt on the piano. Our musical guest this week is the Carolina Blue Band with more talent than ought to be legal in the U.S. Let's sing it one more time. We'll keep on the sunny side, always on that sunny side. Keep on that sunny side of life. Well, it will help us every day. It will brighten all the way if you keep on that sunny side of life. This portion of our program is brought to you by Visit North Alabama, the Mountain Lakes Tourist Association. Visit northalabama.org. Travel to visit the 16 North Alabama counties and make this state what it is. Festivals, attractions, restaurants, outdoor activities all over the Yellowhammer State. Blount County, Cherokee County, Colbert County, Coleman County, DeKalb County, Edward County, Franklin County, Jackson County, Lauderdale County, Lawrence County, Limestone County, Madison County, Marion County, Marshall County, Morgan County, and Winston County. Visit the Horton Mill Bridge just off Alabama 75, about 5 miles north of Oneonta, built in 1935. All the work done strictly by hand. Or how about the North Alabama Barbecue Trail? Trek across North Alabama on a holy pilgrimage of saturated fat and slow-smoked pork. Other states do barbecue different than Alabama. That's not to say that they don't do theirs right, but that is absolutely to say that they do it wrong. You can visit the Train Depot Trail, or you can visit the 7 state parks and make you believe in magic. Go to the Joe Wheeler State Park and see the sunset over the Tennessee River. Or the Rickwood Caverns, a miracle mile of underground caves that'll either dazzle you or scare the bejesus out of you. Whatever you do, you can do it better in North Alabama. Look them up online at Visit North Alabama or northalabama.org or hashtag Visit NorthAL. Keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Keep on the sunny side of life. Oh, it will help us every day. It will guide us all the way if you keep on that sunny side of life. Hey, that's good singing, good singing. Let's have a tune here from our musical guest, the Carolina Blue Band. Everybody, the Carolina Blue Band.
Calling me, I hear bluegrass calling me. Listen to the fiddle, hear that banjo ring. Now that's bluegrass calling me. From the big state of Kentucky to the heart of Tennessee, and then you move on down to the Grand Ole Opry. You can hear those fiddles and the Osborne brothers sing. Now that's bluegrass calling me. Bluegrass music, and I believe Bill Monroe's here to stay. calling me. Yodelay, yodelay, yodelay.
We're going to read a little of our mail this evening, a little bit of our mail sent in to us from listeners all over the U.S. who had nothing better to do than to string a few sentences together and let us know what's on their mind, or from people who've been listening to our show because they are trapped in nursing homes and far away from the radio and can't reach the knob, or people whose children are driving them nuts and they use this show that we do as kind of a sedative, a tranquilizer, because we're known to put people to sleep. First letter comes from Aaron Gonzalez in Austin, Texas. Hey, Sean, I want to wish my dad a happy birthday. He's a big fan of the show, and he'll be traveling to Louisiana to take a cruise with my mom today. They're disembarking in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I just hope he knows how much we love him. Happy 60th to my dad, Augie. Dear Augie, happy 60th from everybody here tonight. Happy 60th birthday. Lydia Smithers in Dothan, Alabama writes, I stopped going to church after I broke my leg, which is a long story, Sean, but I'm ready to go back. I go to a small church with 37 members, and I've missed seeing them. They are my friends. It's no fun being stuck on the sofa, but my husband has been awesome, and he's finally, after 29 years of marriage, learned how to make a decent breakfast. My eggs were a little rubbery the first few days, but now he cooks even better than I do. I have been listening to your show for a few weeks now. Thank you for helping me recover. Dear Lydia, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you get well soon. Darian Trotman, Portland, Oregon. Sean, I've never been to the South until this summer when I visited one of my mother's relatives in Birmingham, Alabama. It was hot and clammy, but I loved it so much because the weather changed like every 5 minutes or so. Where I live, it can get pretty cloudy, and it can stay that way for a long time. Trust me, you don't want to be here during a cloudy season. I brought my guitar with me on my trip to Birmingham, and I went to a few night spots and sat in on stage. And to make a long story short, I made some friends there, and I might move to Birmingham to help these guys I met start a band. I guess you don't know where your journey will lead you until you take the plunge. Maybe I'll be a Southerner one day after all. Dear Darian, I think it's too late to turn back now. Come on down and play that guitar for us. Shelley Sermons, Iola, Kansas. I've never written you before, but I had a story happen, and I just had to tell someone about it. My mother is 80 years old and hadn't been feeling well. There have been a lot of colds and flus going around here in Kansas, and I have been checking on her time and time again. My husband checks on her during the mornings, and I check on her at night. And when I walked through the door yesterday, I saw her lying on the floor, and an empty mug was spilt on the floor next to her, and I just lost it. She wasn't moving. My mother has been my rock for my entire life, and when I went to touch her, she rolled over and looked at me and said, "Boo!" "I gotcha," she said. And I had to help her off the floor. Sean, I told her she's gonna wish she was dead from now on. Oh, but my mother's always been a jokester, and come to find out, she had been on the floor to pick up a spilled mug of tea when she heard my footsteps on the porch, so she decided to play a joke on me and play dead. I don't know what I'm gonna do with that woman. Thought that was a story you could read on your podcast. Your friend, Shelley. Dear Shelley, I believe you get the award today for the best story. Terry Shellmacher, Houston, Texas. Tell my wife, Rhonda, that I want to wish her a happy 40-year anniversary on February 11th. She's everything to me, and I know I've put her through a hard 40 years sometimes, but I'm glad to be off the road, out of sales, and trying to pitch people products they don't want to buy, and back home for good. I plan on spoiling her for the next 40 years to come. Dear Terry and Rhonda, happy 40th anniversary, happy 40 years. From everybody here tonight, may you have many, many, many more to come. Deborah Ann Clark, Tampa, Florida. I just wanted to tell my daughter Sandra that I'm proud of her from graduating from nursing school. At the end of this semester, she will be done. She has worked harder than any woman I ever knew, and somehow she's managed to raise 2 boys in the middle of it. That's my daughter, Sean. That's the kind of woman she is. Sandra, I will be your support system forever. I'm so proud of you. Ellis Haywood, Richmond, Tennessee. Sean, I had never been overseas to a foreign country before, not ever in my life. I'm 46 years old, and I'm single after a painful divorce that left me alone. We didn't have kids. She got the dog, and I was distraught. I started thinking that I would quit feeling sorry for myself, and I took my very first trip. It started with a one-way ticket to Belgium, and after that, I just wandered around, staying wherever my heart desired. I'm writing you now from Savoca, Sicily. It's a town where I've been working as a waiter in a restaurant, and it turns out my speaking English comes in handy for all the English-speaking tourists, and I'm about to leave for England tomorrow. I've never been there. I've always wanted to see the countryside of England. I listen to your show, and it reminds me of home. If you get a chance, say a prayer for this Southerner who's hopping the globe right now in hopes of learning who he is. It really has healed me, and I'm grateful that I am in good health enough to follow my dream to travel. I was always too scared to do it until now. Sometimes I guess bad situations ends up leading you toward the thing you wanted and needed the most. Thanks and ciao. Dear Ellis, traveling mercies, our brother, traveling mercies. Hal Gorman, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Dear Sean, found your show by accident and have been listening to all of them in a row. Just wanted to drop you a line and say thanks. Thanks for the stuff. It means a lot to this Minnesotan boy. William from Siloam Springs, Arkansas. My son and daughter did something that made me so proud today. They came running in and started making all this food on the counter, Sean, and I wondered what was going on. Come to find out, there was a homeless old guy on our corner, not far from their bus stop. They made 5 or 6 sandwiches and gave him bags of Lay's potato chips from our cupboard, and they did it so coolly that they almost didn't even tell us about it. They didn't seem to want any credit or any fanfare. And when I asked them about it, they said he was hungry, and we just didn't want him to be that way. It was as simple as that. My kids didn't learn this from me, Sean. It had to have come from somewhere else, maybe my wife. And now I'm learning it from them. Thanks for reading this over the air. My kids' names are Jason and Lauren. Sometimes their mom has them listen to your show in the van. Dear Jason and Lauren, I hope you never, ever grow up. Susan H., Helen, Georgia. Do you ever feel so sad you want to just curl up and never crawl out of your hole? Well, I did. And I wasn't sure if I'd ever get over it. And then I met this guy. His name doesn't really matter, but he saved me. We started dating, and I realized he was changing me. Love changes somebody, doesn't it, Sean? I think it does. We got married, and he asked me what I wanted most in this life. And all I've ever wanted was to be happy. He said, well, what would make you happy? So I just pulled out the craziest thing I could think of, kind of to be funny. I said, I want to have a place of our own in the country just to do my own thing on the porch. I've always wanted that, Sean, but I never thought I would actually get it. Well, silly me. My husband bought a piece of land, and over the last 10 years, very, very slowly, he has been building this place for us piece by piece when the money comes in little by little, all by hand. The boards, the beams that make our house what it is were built by him. And we're going to move in it this spring, and he did it for me, Sean, for me. Please, if you read this letter, I want anybody out there to know who feels sad. The sadness did not last forever, and it is people who help to take it away, if you ask me. Sometimes you find them, sometimes they find you. But either way, you have to trust people. Dear Susan, I wish you a happy housewarming. And anyone out there listening tonight, either the podcast raves or the radio or in the audience out here, may you find joy for your soul if you are sad. And when you do, may you share it with another and light up the entire world. Keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. And that's letters from our listeners. We're going to have another tune here. Another tune from the Carolina Blue Band, everybody. Put it together from the Carolina Blue Band.
Cattle grazing high on a ridge. That old mountain preacher telling us about heaven. In that little country church house round the bend. Tell you that time passes slow to a young man. Before you know his mind will start to dream and take him far away to the lights of the city and the pleasures of life that he's never seen. And I wonder if Daddy's still plowing in the meadow. Does the old farmhouse still look the same? Does Mama still sing on the front porch while she's working? Rock of ages, cleft for me. I can still
I love this season probably more than I like a whole lot of other seasons because in this part of the world, this is the time when the whole universe starts to fold upon itself and flirt with itself. You can see the longleaf pines on one side of our world flirting with the longleaf pines on the other side of the world. And they do this through yellow dust called pollen. You can walk out to your driveway and look at your car, because that's where we keep our cars in this part of the world. We take our worthless junk and we keep it sheltered from the rain inside our garage. And we keep the most expensive thing, our vehicle, out in the elements on the driveway. You walk out to that car, you look at it, you'll notice something about the windshield. It's cloudy. And you take your thumb, you swipe it from one side to the next, and look at your thumbprint. You will see a huge pile of yellow dust. Do not sniff this dust or you will end up dead. Yes, this is a tough time of year because wildlife is starting to look at each other with eyes of romance. The raccoons are on the road, the possums are on the road, the deer on the side of the road, and so are the trees. The trees are pollinating and they are talking to one another with romantic love songs. That's what pollen is. It's a love song between trees. I went fishing not so long ago with my cousin Ed Lee and a man from Texas. Cousin Ed Lee knew this man from Texas because he was a supplier of my cousin Ed Lee's job. And my cousin Ed Lee was trying to earn some brownie points. We got out into that boat and we were cruising along into Choctawhatchee Bay. And we had our lines in the water. There's a rule among men who are fishing. You don't discuss your marriage. If you do this and you discuss it, it opens up a conversational floor and you will hear things about people's marital relationships that you don't want to know. The man from Texas looked off into the brush and he saw this thing hopping along. It had a little white tail on its behind and two long ears. He said, "What is that?" And my cousin Ed Lee said, "That is a little cottontail rabbit." The man from Texas just kind of smirked, said, out in Texas, we got cottontail rabbits that are about the size of Shetland ponies. My cousin Ed Lee looked at me and he rolled his eyes. You can tell a Texan. Not very long after that, we were fishing right up near Hogtown Bayou, and we saw this man who my cousin Ed Lee have known him for a long time. His name's Daniel, walking along with his dog, Buster. Buster's a coonhound. My cousin Ed Lee looked at that coonhound and said, "How about that? You ever seen one of them?" The man from Texas said, "What is that?" My cousin said, "That is a black and tan coonhound. Ain't you ever seen one?" The man from Texas said, "Oh man, in Texas we got coonhounds, but they are the size of elephants." When we finished fishing, we had a very unsuccessful day. And while we were frying up my little minnow over the fire, there was a loggerhead turtle who was crawling onto the shore into the water. And the man from Texas said, "What is that?" My cousin Ed Lee looked at him and said, "That's a tick." Yes, we got ticks bad, we got pollen bad in this part of the world. It's because the ticks are out looking for love, just like everybody else. I was at the church, the Black Creek Church of Florida, just a few days ago. I saw my aunt and uncle. They were acting as greeters standing on the steps of that little clapboard church with the rusted tin roof and the crooked steeple. Church needs a bad coat of paint. My uncle will probably paint it come July. And they're standing on the porch and they were handing out flyers to each other. If you see two elderly people who are acting as greeters at your local Baptist church, do not be fooled. They are not there to greet you and smile and wish you the love of the Lord. They are there for reconnaissance work. Southern Baptist people place their most attractive older folks who look harmless and sweet and gentle with rosy cheeks and white frilly hair that's thick enough to plant marigolds in. They put these people on the porch to smell your breath And make sure you don't smell like last night. They put these people on the porch to see who's coming to visit the church. And then they relay this message through a radio wire network in the back toward the ushers, who relay this to the pastor, who looks at the people who are visiting in the service, and he will tailor that sermon to them somehow. He will preach until he starts to see these visitors cry. Because ultimately we want them to walk down the aisle after the sermon for the invitation. My uncle stood on those steps and people were walking. I was standing behind this young married couple. Walked up, sweet looking couple, just newly married and still wide-eyed and innocent in this world. That wide-eyed look you can see in a young person who just got married. I love that look. Now, a young man shook my uncle's hand and he said, "Well, we're visiting today." My uncle said, uh-huh. And he tapped that little earpiece in his ear and talked to the Secret Service ushers in code word. The young man said, "Are you married to this woman here?" My aunt smiled, giving her most congenial look she could. My uncle said, oh yeah. He said, "Well, I just got married." My uncle said, "Well, congratulations to you. Congratulations to you." My uncle spoke into that little transmitter in his shirt sleeve and said, two newlyweds. The young man said, "Well, how long have you been married to her?" My uncle said, "You know what? We have been married happily for 7 years, son, 7 years. The other 32 have been complete misery." I went to my friend's wedding a few years ago at the Black Creek Baptist Church. I showed up early to the chapel and I got the best seat in the house, the front row pew. I wanted to see his face when he said those words, "I do." Because truth be told, I didn't know whether or not he could even say those words. He's a guy who was always a little bit afraid of commitment. And we would talk about this, as a matter of fact, while we were fishing. I wanted to see his face when he said, "I do." I wanted to know that he could say them words without turning into a loggerhead turtle and ducking his head back into his shell and darting away for parts unknown. I showed up early, sat there in that wood pew, and the church was beginning to fill up. Miss Betty was playing the piano. Miss Betty's been playing the piano for a long time. I can remember her playing the piano for a long time. She plays extremely well when the batteries of her hearing aids have been replaced. She played songs that you hear at every wedding, Canon in D. She played the Lord's Prayer. She prayed "Unless the Lord builds the house." She played "I Love You with the Love of the Lord." Oh, good songs. Now, while I was sitting there and the church was beginning to fill up with people, there was a woman who sat next to me. She was the aunt of the bride. Her name was Aunt Irma. She held out her white gloved hand to me and said, "I'm Aunt Irma. What's your name?" I told her. She said, "And who are you here to support?" I said, "Ma'am, I'm friends of the groom." She said, "Yeah, and how do you know the groom?" I said, "Well, we used to go fishing together, grew up fishing together." She said, "What?" And that woman looked at me like I had cockroaches growing out of my eye sockets. She said, "I didn't know he fished." I said, "Oh, yes, ma'am. He can gut a trout faster than a bobcat." She said, "He fishes?" I said, sure does. It was about this time, judging by her reaction, that I started to feel that something was off. Something was very, very off. Something was wrong. And eventually I realized that I knew something was wrong when I watched the groom walk down the center aisle to take the altar with his best man, and I realized I had never seen that man before in my life. He was a young man, tall and skinny, with a long, lean neck and two big ears that looked like people in my family. He had a sheepish, innocent, happy look on his face that looked like he was punch drunk in love. And he stood there at the altar with his best man, and they rocked back and forth on their feet, and I was starting to have chest pains. I was looking to see how I could dart out of this room as fast as I could. But I was too late. Because I could not dart out of the back of the room. The doors were already swinging wide open, and the music was playing them familiar chords of marriage. Bum, bum, ba-dum, bum, bum, ba-bum. And I looked up at the ceiling and I said, "Dear Lord, what have I done?" And that woman, she came walking down that aisle slowly. She wore a gown that was elegant enough to break your heart, big and white with a long white train that was being carried by a little young man who was making ugly faces toward the young women in the audience. He'd stick out his tongue. He'd hold that garment. As she got down to the altar, Aunt Irma, she looked at me and she said, oh, doesn't she look radiant?" I looked at Aunt Irma, I said, "Does she ever?" In fact, I didn't even recognize her. The woman was a complete stranger to me, just like the groom. I didn't know who any of these people were in this building. In fact, they had a visiting minister. I didn't even know who he was. I realized through looking at this little invitation that had been sent to me in the mail by my friend that I was in the right chapel on the wrong wedding weekend. Never before have I felt like such a heel. But the service was beautiful. The service was beautiful. I realized there was nothing I could do. I had to sit through it, and so I did. Now listen to these two young people recite their own wedding vows. Now, there's nothing more traumatic than sitting and listening to somebody read through wedding vows that are about the size of a term paper. That young man, that skinny young man, had written an entire sonnet for his wife. This sonnet was long and drawn out, and it had 4-syllable words in it that I can't even remember. And he started to recite these, and he recited pieces of Robert Frost poetry and excerpts from famous pieces of literature. And it was beautiful. It was gorgeous, I won't lie. And when he finally finished, all the Southern Baptist women in the audience looked at their husbands with looks of disgust. Because their husbands don't do sorts of things like this. It's like the time that I went and visited my aunt and uncle for supper, and my aunt was looking out the window. There's a young couple who lived next door to them, and this young man was walking up the sidewalk to see his wife after work, and he was carrying a big old bouquet of flowers. And my aunt rapped on the window in disgust, and she looked at my uncle and she said, "Why don't you ever do that?" My uncle looked at her and said, "Well, now don't be silly. I don't even know that young woman's name." Oh, after the vows that the groom had read, it was the bride's turn, and she brought out this little folded sheet of paper, and she read through the vows. Oh, they were heart-wrenching and honest, and when she opened up her mouth, she had this rural accent of my people, the accent of the entire rural America. It was beautiful, and she spoke these vows. She said, "I will love you, I will cherish you, till death do us part." Oh, I loved it. And when she finished, most of the people in that church were suffering dehydration. Aunt Irma beside me, she was tearing up so hard that I had to hand her a Kleenex. She thanked me and she wrapped her arm around me. She said, "You know, you're kind of cute." And then she patted my knee and she kind of left her hand there. And I looked around for the fire exits. When the service finished and the minister announced the bride and the groom, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to announce to you the bride and the groom, Mr. and Mrs. Phillips." And the people clapped and they walked down the aisle to the song, "Lean on Me." Now, I'd never heard this song at a wedding before, and I've never heard it since. But it works. And the people in the audience were starting to sing a little bit with this song, humming Everybody knows the lyrics to this Bill Withers song. Even Aunt Irma was swaying to and fro to the music, and it got me singing a little bit because Aunt Irma had her arm hooked around mine. Her arm was hooked around mine very tightly, and I started to sniff a little bit. Hearing that many people sing in support of a young couple starting their new life together, it was moving. And I started to leak in my eyes a little bit. And Aunt Irma said, "Are you okay?" I said, "It's fine, I'm fine. It's just all this pollen." She said, "Oh, there now. Sometimes it's hard saying goodbye to your fishing buddies." Well, after it's all said and done, I almost left that building altogether. I almost got in my truck and just pretended it had never happened. But when I got to the parking lot, I felt very badly about not going to the reception and saying a few words to the happy couple, because I felt like I'd intruded on the most personal day a man will ever have. My wedding was perhaps the height of my entire existence. The greatest day of my life happened in that little clapboard chapel when I looked at the end of that aisle and saw them doors swing open and Miss Betty was playing bum, bum, ba-bum, and I saw this white dress and this brunette hair float down the aisle toward me. That woman represented the rest of my life wearing a dress. It was the happiest I had ever been. And I remember looking up into the rafters and hoping that the spirit of my late father was there to see me make that set of vows to a woman. So I walked back into that old fellowship hall. I walked back in, and Aunt Irma was the first to greet me. She said, "Oh, I'm glad you came." She got me up a red Solo cup full of iced tea. This thing tasted like paint thinner sweetened with a gallon of sugar. Oh, it was good. It was good. And I walked to a table and I sat down. Everybody was eating fried chicken. And I said, no, I don't think I'll have any of that. I didn't want to take any of the food. And Aunt Irma sat beside me, and she hooked her arms around me, and we were just in time to see the father-daughter dance. The father and daughter took the dance floor, and they danced to the song, if you hear a song in blue, like a flower crying for the dew, that was my heart serenading you. So they swayed back and forth, and that young woman placed her head on that old man's shoulder. His white hair was just as white as the gowns that the choir wears on Sunday mornings, and they bobbed back and forth and waltzed. And if there's anything more beautiful than a father-daughter dance, I don't care to know what it is. And then the music changed. The DJ took the floor and he played a loud thumping music, and the young folks took the floor and they danced in a way that Southern Baptists do not do. We do not believe in this kind of movement. This is why you can look at me and see my stiff posture when I walked across this stage tonight. And you know I was raised evangelical, because we walk like we have no rhythm, like there's a corn cob. Well, Aunt Irma, she was looking at me with longing feelings. She said, "You want to dance?" I said, "You know what? I don't think I better. I got a titanium hip that I'm still making payments on." She didn't take no for an answer. She grabbed me by the arm, she dragged me up onto the dance floor, and we danced the cha-cha slide together. Boy, that woman had some moves. After we were done, things got a little bit slower, and she wrapped her arms around me, and the DJ played "I Can't Help Falling in Love with You." And I had to warn that old woman to be careful where she placed her two wandering hands. And when it was all said and done, I headed for the door. I clipped a $20 bill onto that money tree that was just beside the bridal cake, and I was almost to the door when the bride and the groom stopped me. They stopped me, and the bride said, "You know, you look awful familiar. I noticed you all tonight. Just kind of wondered, who'd you come here with?" Oh, my God. I started to choke a little bit. But before I could get another word out, Aunt Irma came from the shadows, and she hooked her arm around mine. She said, he's with me. He's with me, and I'm divorcing your Uncle Edward, so deal with it. And I looked at that young man, I shook his hand, and I hugged the neck of the bride. And when I shook that young man's hand, I shook him with both hands because I was moved. I love a wedding. And when I looked into his eyes, I saw the two naive and wholly innocent but a little bit ignorant eyes of youth staring back at me. It was the same face I used to see in the mirror a long time ago. Young, hopeful, a little bit timid, somewhat scared. You don't know what love presents to you. Is it a series of obstacles that you must climb over? Or is it a bed of roses? Is it going to be for better or is it going to be for worse? Are you going to be for richer or are you going to be for poor? You don't know. But you do it, and you do it. You do it with a holy ignorance, a kind of innocence and naivety that is nothing but sacred. And I looked at him and I said, congratulations to you, son. And if you should ever want to go fishing, give me a call. I left that wedding reception, and just before I hit that door, my hand got on the doorknob. Aunt Irma came up behind me, and she slapped my hind parts for no apparent reason and said, don't be a stranger if you ever need a woman to hold you tight, because I'm applying for the job. Hey, thanks for listening to me this evening. It's been a wonderful privilege and pleasure. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me this evening. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to Sean of the South. I've been your host today, Sean Dietrich, and man, it's been a bona fide pleasure if I do say so myself. This episode was brought to you by Case Knives, a tradition of my family dating back to my granddaddy, who once said the best cure for idle hands was to build something, so keep your hands sharp with a case knife. And by Folklore Brewing Company, quite literally the best brew in Alabama. Folklore Brewing Company brought in 2 gold medals at the Alabama Craft Beer Competition. Do yourself a favor and check out Folklore Brewing and Meadery.com. That music you heard behind me today was the Carolina Blue Band, a Brevard, North Carolina-based band whose roots run deep in the tradition of Bill Monroe. The band was formed in 2007 after the release of their album Nothing So Blue by Bobby Powell and Tim Jones. If you have a second, check out CarolinaBlueBand.com and download their music today. You will not regret it. To find anything more about what I do, you can visit SeanOfTheSouthShow.com, and there you can find archived episodes dating back to our first episode to this one you just heard. While you're there, I hope you take the time to drop me a line to me about your birthday announcements, wedding invitations, and potluck socials, and I do my best to read them over there for my friends because I love to do that sort of stuff for my friends. And speaking of friends, if winning ain't everything, then why are we still keeping score? Adios.